Welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Janitors. So as always, I am Sergeant Q, and I'm joined by Doc Jess. And today we have a special surprise for you guys. We're going to bring in our very first in-studio guest. It's going to be a new segment that we have, or it's going to be in addition to a segment that we already have, having a guest in studio with us. And so we're not going to tell you who it is. You're going to have to stay tuned to find out. But once a month, we think we're going to do this, right?
Yeah.
So we'll do 3 episodes of us just doing what we normally do, and then we'll bring in a guest once a month, change it up a little bit, bring in some of our friends, some of our coworkers, some of you viewers who are here who have something dynamic to add to the podcast. We'd love to add you guys. And so I know Casey will put a link. If you want to be a guest on the show, we'll have a vetting process for you. It's going to be really, really tough. I was a Naval Weapons Security Manager, so I have a lot of tough questions if you want to be on this podcast.
You didn't ask me any questions.
I just kind of told you, like, I got this idea. Let's do it. No, there will be some questions. We can't just let everybody on the show. But if you have something of value to add and you can be dynamic, then great. We'd love to have you on the show and share your knowledge with our viewers. It would be fantastic.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that in a few minutes. But let's go over what we're going to do today.
Yeah.
So as always, we talk about new advancements. And so we'll talk about wearables again and some other wearables that are more successful, I think, than the one we shared before. We're also going to talk about communication. So how we succeed and fail at communication as regards to our mental health. And that's when we're going to bring in our guest to help us unpack this idea of communication around mental health. Then we're going to talk about some negative forms of communication like social media, how social media can actually be detrimental to our mental health, and some safeguards that we can put in place to make sure that we're using these things responsibly and not damaging our mental health or our friends' mental health, right?
Yeah.
And then we will conclude, as always, with a little micro session, a micro
Therapy session.
therapy or counseling. What are we going to call it?
Counseling.
Counseling?
Therapy.
Therapy? Whatever you want to call it.
Flight attendant, stewardess. I don't know.
Yeah, a micro version of a therapy session to help you guys unpack and understand what that looks like. So if you've been through therapy, you know, but if you haven't, you're a little apprehensive. This will give you a little bit of a window into what that looks like. And as always, I will be the guinea pig, and Doc Jess will be leading me through different therapies as we go through this. All right, so stay tuned, guys. We're going to get into this in just a couple minutes. All right, so let's talk about some other advancements. So on our last episode, we talked about wearables, and we talked about one that was really just kind of hitting the market and coming out. And wearables, they're not something new. They've been out for a while. And so people are trying to innovate new techniques and new things that are out there. The one that we talked about last week, if you forgot, it was a tag that actually went on your clothes that could connect or could track some biometrics, give you some biometric feedback. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's a good $2 word.
Right, yes. Yeah. Biometric feedback. $2, that was like a $10 word. Biometric feedback. That's good.
You can have $10 for that.
So we talked about some of the limitations that might have and how trying to create a new behavior in somebody is difficult. And then that was like 3 new behaviors. So we talked about kind of the negative implications of some of those. And so today we wanted to showcase one that has been a wild success for a variety of reasons, which is the Oura Ring.
Oura, O-U-R-A.
O-U-R-A.
Ring.
Oura Ring. Okay. Do they have they should have a pronunciation on their website, right? Okay.
I think that's how you pronounce it.
We might be wrong. So if you're a developer of the Oura Ring, send us a soundbite. How do we say it exactly? Because your product is actually pretty legit. And so I did a little bit of research on these guys. They were a Kickstarter campaign in 2015. So that's how long ago these wearables have been out. Now you guys might have just remembered like the Fitbit or the Apple Watch, things like that. But these things have been developed for a long time. And so the Oura Ring is kind of a step further. It's a smaller, more compact piece of equipment, and it's a lot less intrusive. And there's not a lot of new behavior or behavior modification that somebody needs to have to be able to utilize this, because most of us wear a ring, especially if you're married. you're used to just wearing a ring all the time. Even if you're not married, people wear rings. It's just something that it's just in our culture. So it's not a new behavior. So that's part of the reason I think that they're really successful, because you don't have to modify a behavior or start a new behavior to learn how to use the product, which is great. You just put it on and it starts tracking your biometric data. Now, so it was developed in 2015. That's when the Kickstarter came out.
And what does that mean, Kickstarter?
So Kickstarter is really cool. You guys have probably heard of it, but how it works, it's a crowdfunding source that you can use to get new products or services off the ground. So Kickstarter campaign, it's almost like a social network. So you go on there, you can look at all these different business startup ideas that people have, and you can watch your little videos, read about it. And if you're like, yeah, you know what, I want to help these guys get off the ground, you can give them money. And in return for that money, they're going to give you part of the product, or there's all these different incentives if you're going to be
part
one
of the Kickstarter.
Right. Part of the Kickstarter, help them get started. So it's called crowdfunding. And so there's been a few different, websites out there that try to help people with crowdfunding. Not a lot of them have been very successful. If you look at the success rate of Kickstarter campaigns, it's actually really low. Mm-hmm. So there's not a lot of people who've had great success with it. But those who do have had astronomical success. I have a friend actually who has multiple successful Kickstarter campaigns. He's got a whole formula to how it's done. And so maybe we'll have him on as a guest sometime to talk about that.
That's a good idea.
But yeah, so these Kickstarter campaigns, not a lot of them pay out or become successful, but this one actually did. So in 2015, they said, hey, we have this idea for a wearable that's a ring. It collects all this data. A lot of people said, yes, let's do it. They gave them a bunch of money, and then they built their prototype. And in 2018 is actually when it hit the market for real. So that's when it went from Kickstarter to the marketplace, and it started really taking off. And they hit product market fit about 12 months after that initial launch, because it was so easy for people to understand the product. Oh, it's just a ring that I wear that works like a Fitbit or Apple Watch, but it's just smaller, more compact. And so people started utilizing it. Mm-hmm. And if you look into the aggregate data that they collect, it's pretty awesome. So what did you see when you looked this up? What kind of aggregate data did you find?
Well, I don't know what aggregate data is.
Yes, I'm stumping the doc over here. Okay. So aggregate data, it's a term that we use in technology when you're building tech. So you have your PHI, which is personal health data, right? Which is like who you are, your demographics, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But then we also have aggregate data, which are these little bits of data that aren't necessarily tied to a specific person. Okay. They're tied to a specific group of people. Okay. So you could say, if you wanted to look at the aggregate data for women versus men who are utilizing this technology, there wouldn't be specific identifiers for you as a person,
sure, but
since you're a female, you'd be in this group. So your data would be put into this larger group of data. And I'd be able to look at that and say, 80% of my clientele are female and only 20% are male. So the smart money would be to make most of my advertising move toward women. Now, if I wanted to collect more of the male demographic, then I would do some test markets of how do I advertise better to the male demographic. Based on the aggregate data, I could see if I put out a campaign for men, did that increase or decrease the amount of men who purchased during that time? So that's what aggregate data can do. It can help you look at this broader scope of all the data that you have and be able to define small little slices to make improvements in your product. So does that answer your question?
Kind of. So a couple things I thought was really cool about it was, and I have worn a Fitbit for years, and there's certain parts of the Fitbit that are so beneficial for me in my mental health. And there's a few things that this Oura Ring has that the Fitbit has, like your heart rate and your sleep, calculating your sleep and how to get a better routine and structure to get better sleep. And you can get your own data on what works and what doesn't when you're looking at your sleep patterns. And maybe one night I turned all the lights off and listened to soft music 2 hours before bedtime. And I did that for a week. And then I did nothing for a week. And I can look at the two and see, okay, which one is actually affecting my sleep? And so I think it's good for that. I think as we were kind of looking at it, the body temperature.
Yeah, that was something new that I haven't seen in a wearable before. I'm not saying it's not out there, but I've never seen one that advertised, hey, we can check your body temperature. And for me, that's super important because I know if I get overheated, I get too hot, I start having nightmares like immediately. So that I thought was really cool. That body temperature monitoring was pretty good.
Yeah. And then also they have like a readiness score, which is kind of equivalent to the newer Fitbit models, is how much you're putting out and how much you're replenishing. It has some kind of, what is that word? Algorithm to say like, hey, you're at like 17% right now. Go, and then I could go do like a read my Bible and do some prayer time. For me, that would be able to like pull me back up to 36% to get me to the rest of my day, as far as like a readiness score, how depleted I am, how full I am, things like that. And really that helps me in such a busy and go world to like help me realize where I'm at, specifically with my Fitbit. And I know this, we're talking about the Oura Ring, but that readiness score, when I'm getting ready to come home for the day, if I had this Oura Ring and it told me I had a readiness score of 17% after I just met with 8 clients, right? I know I want to get that readiness score up a little bit so that I can come home and give my family my best. So I think that's a really beneficial piece to this Oura Ring.
So that readiness score, think about it like your battery life on your phone, right?
Yeah.
It's exactly what it is. It's your
own
personal
battery life.
Yeah, it's your personal battery life, right? You're at 17%, you want to plug that thing in so it doesn't die on you, right? Yeah. Same thing with your own body.
Yeah.
That's what's really cool about these wearables is all these things are happening to you already. It doesn't change any of that. It just makes you more aware of them. On a conscious level, you're able to look at that and be like, wow, I need to take some time to get myself replenished because like you said, you want to give your family your best. And so really important. Also, maybe your client load was too big that day, right?
Yeah.
If you see that you're really depleted, you start to see the pattern emerge, right? And you say, okay, well, maybe I need to back this off because when I was doing 6 clients, I didn't have this problem. Now I'm doing 8. Maybe back that off to 7, try that for a couple months and see what happens. And all of that data is stored inside of that Oura Ring. So it's not in the ring itself. It sends that data to an app, which is then kept on a database. And you can look at that over a year's time frame and be able to see patterns that emerge in your life. This is the same thing that we did with our technology, with our app. You do a daily wellness check where you check in, and all of that data is collected and saved. And then we reflect that back to the member every week. And so you see your weekly, monthly, and year-to-date score. And it's really cool. We're working right now with the dev team to create, because I say mental health journey, right? Like your mental health journey, because people think good mental health is like a destination. It's not, it's a journey. There's going to be ups and downs, right?
Yeah.
And so now you get to see that. And so what I want is a little avatar, a little character of the member to be walking, on these ups and downs. And, when they're at a low point, during that week, it can tag it and ask them like, what happened? And they can just make a couple notes in there about what happened, or if something was really high, it'll ask them like, what are these highs and lows? And then you can look at this at the end of the year. You can spend some time to actually look at your own mental health journey and see like, what did I do well and where did I need some support? So you can make better plans for the future.
Yeah, that's really good.
And so I journal all the time. And I just turned over a stack of journals since 2020 to my secretary. And I said, I want you to take all of these and digitize them. And she just about melted. She's like, no. I said, but what that does is it helps me track my own mental health journey, which is why we put that into the technology, because something that's been really valuable for me is to go back and look through those journals, my daily devotionals and things like that. That's how I wrote my first book, and it's how I'm getting ready to write my second book, is based on all of this stuff. So with these wearables out there, the Oura Ring is probably one of my favorites that's out there when it comes to wearables, because it is so small and it doesn't take a lot of time or energy to figure out how to utilize it. It's just working in the background as you go through your daily life. So I really like that. There's a lot of wearables out there, so check them out, see which one works for you. Look at what kind of data that you want to see of your body and of your day, and then decide which one works best for you. I really like the idea of wearables. It's something that I think all of us could benefit from.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, like my husband, he can't do wearables to sleep because then he obsesses over that sleep, and he looks at it and he's like, oh, I only got, an hour and 43 minutes of REM. And then he kind of obsesses over like the rest of the day that he didn't sleep well. And so some people don't necessarily like it, but I like it.
Yeah. And so for those people that obsess over it like that, maybe you just don't check it every day. Maybe you check it once a week.
Yeah.
Right. And so then that way you're not constantly worried about like, oh, I didn't get enough sleep. And then that puts that in your mind. And so you really, anything that negative that happened, you start to focus in on that. The negative bias kicks in, you get stuck on stupid. And then you just kind of start looking for all these negative outputs in your life. Yeah. So definitely you got to put some safeguards in front of that. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later when we talk about social media, right?
A little bit.
Yeah, some safeguards, maybe some tips. Awesome. All right. So that's what we have for you guys for new technology coming out. These wearables, check it out. Oura Ring is on Gen 3. Like I said, there's a bunch of them out there. It can get overwhelming. So just take your time, find one that works for you, and try them out.
Yeah. All right. So today for our tool that we're going to be sharing about for our toolbox, we're going to talk about communication. And I asked, I have like 25, 30 other counselors that I'm in a group with. And I asked for ideas for our podcast for mental health reasons. Like, what are the top reasons people come in for counseling for mental health issues, right? And I mean, the top is always communication, right? You have to communicate in your families, with your spouse, with your coworkers, with your boss, with your grocery store checker. Like, communication is everywhere. And I found it so interesting. In a study I read, only 2% of people have actually read a book or taken a class or done a seminar to improve their communication.
All right. I'm in the 2%.
So we all are, if there's so many different theories with communication, right? And the basic one I like to talk about is passive, aggressive, and assertive, because we're all raised by somebody who has a passive communication style or an aggressive communication style. Very rarely are we raised with people who have an assertive communication style, because that is an intentionally learned, productive and healthy communication style. So a passive communication style will look like somebody who avoids conflict at all costs, doesn't talk much, doesn't have much of a voice, those kinds of character traits. An aggressive communication style will be somebody who raises their voice to try to get their point across and belittles people to try to control, things like that. That's kind of the extreme. And then there's somewhere in the middle. And it depends on what scenario you're in, what relationship you're in, where any of those types of communication styles will come out. And so we are going to talk a little bit about communication today and what healthy communication looks like. And this is where we're going to bring in our awesome first guest.
Yes. So Casey Majorca is going to be our first guest on the podcast. And it's actually perfect because he's the guy who makes all this stuff happen. So when we talk about communication, he's the one who helps us communicate with all of you.
Yeah.
So he has set up the whole janitor closet with all the lighting, the cameras, the microphones. He takes all of the content that we put out and he takes it back to the lab, and then he renders it into something that you guys all hear and see and think is great. Right? So he takes all of the stuff that we put out and he produces it really into the podcast that you see. So he takes care of doing the graphics, the overlays, making sure the sound quality is good, the lighting. So he's the guy who makes all of this stuff happen and look good. And so we thought it would be perfect to bring him in when we talk about communication, because he helps us communicate the value that we have to all of you. And so, Casey, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You kind of been here the whole time.
I have. I've been hiding in the back, but it's been a lot of fun. And I'll tell you, I love the lab. I'm going to start calling it the lab. I love that much better than my office or the editing bay. It's way better than that.
The lab, it's where you create, right? And you experiment with different things. Yeah. So the lab, that's what I say when I'm working like in my brain, trying to get it out, an idea out on paper or
I've heard you say it a few times.
I call it the lab because I'm experimenting. I'm building something new. The lab, that's a great.
I'm loving it.
So tell us a little bit about you and how, who you are and how you got started on this project and, what you were doing before this that has prepared you to be right here, right now.
Yeah. Well, this project, it was real easy. Aaron came to me and was like, "Hey, bro, I got an idea." And he pitched this idea and I was like, wow, I want to be a part of that. That sounds like fun. I actually produced a small podcast for a little while. And, it's funny when we started talking about communication, I was like, wow, I actually have some experience in this. I used to be a flight instructor, and I can tell you firsthand when you're teaching somebody about operating something that is, it's life and death. If you don't do it right, someone can die. Communication is huge. Clear communication, positive being positive, not beating them down and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then another one of my passions is helping people with their finances. And so me and my wife do one-on-one financial coaching. And I can tell you, again, that communication is the biggest problem in personal finance when you have a significant other. If you're not communicating, you're going to have problems. And like we've all mentioned before, we talk about these things, we do these things. One of the reasons I know all that is we're not perfect either. And we have those moments. And I've had those moments, in our personal finances where we're like, and we realize it and we start to communicate and, oh, wow, everything's working great. Yeah. Or I've had students where you get upset or you're not clearly defining what you want. It's like, well, maybe I'm the problem. Mm-hmm. And you start going back and you redo everything and all of a sudden they get it. It's like, I wasn't being clear. Mm-hmm. So clear communication is a huge deal.
Yeah. And that's why in counseling, a lot of times it feels so cheesy, but if I have a mother-daughter or a family or a couple that I'm working with, we practice 2 very intentional communication styles when trying to communicate things that could be conflicting or for conflict resolution, right? So one example that I like to give is Thursdays are my long day at work, right? And I see 8 to 9 clients those days. So I'm gone 11 to 12 hours. So I get up a little earlier on those days and I clean the kitchen and I make sure that the kitchen is clean, the dishes are done, so that when I come home that day, all the things I prepped for dinner, I can just go right into prepping and cooking dinner for my family, right? If I come home and my two girls, my daughters, have messed up the kitchen, there's dishes in the sink and there's peanut butter and jelly rubbed all over the counter and all that, right? Like my first instinct is going to want to come home because I'm exhausted and say, girls, come here. Why did you leave all this stuff out? I've been working all day. This is frustrating for me right now. I'm yelling at them and they're kind of like, oh yeah, feeling bad, right? So that's like the natural instinct of wanting to communicate. And so 2 of these other options are what we call, a lot of you guys have heard of some of them, I'm sure. The communication sandwich and the I feel statements. And so the communication sandwich would look like this: a positive, the negative, then the positive. So I come home, I recognize that I'm irritated because they messed up the kitchen, but I also walk around the house and see that they cleaned their rooms and that maybe my 7-year-old drew me a picture while I was gone. And so I'm going to say, hey girls, come here. I'm going to say the positive first. I really appreciate that you guys made sure that you cleaned your rooms, made sure your room stayed clean today. That means a lot to me. I did get up early this morning to clean the kitchen to make sure that when I came home today, the kitchen was clean so I could get right into cooking dinner for you guys. Because now I have to clean the kitchen and it kind of frustrates me when I have to do that, when I made sure that I did it this morning. And Autumn, I saw this really cute picture you drew for me. Thank you for thinking of me today, right? So how do you think they're going to receive that compared to the first one?
Yeah, probably a lot better, probably a lot less hurt feelings, a lot less pushback. Probably, because you didn't notice the other good things that they did.
Yeah. Right. And when people feel attacked or rejected, they want 3 things: defend, deflect, deny. They defend themselves, they deflect it onto something or someone else, or they just deny. And we see it all the time. And so with that communication sandwich, it softens that attack feeling to where they can accept, like usually when I soften it like that, they're like, oh, Mom, I'm so sorry we didn't clean the kitchen for you. And then they want to do it. We've all had those managers or bosses in our life that do as I say because I say it. Mm-hmm. And so when we're doing that job, we're like, I can't, thinking about how much we're getting paid and how we're going to do it to the least of our ability, right? And then we have that boss who's like, hey, I know this is stupid, you guys, but let's get this done. I'm going to work really hard because I respect that boss because they've earned my respect and didn't demand it, right? And so that's the same for like me as a parent or you guys out there as bosses or things like that. But that's the second communication style would be the I feel statement. And so that would be, hey girls, come sit down with me, please. I feel overwhelmed and unappreciated when I come home and the kitchen is a mess because I got up really early this morning before I went to my big day at work to make sure that I cleaned it so that when I came home, it would be clean for me to cook you guys dinner, right? How are they going to take that, right? I'm taking it off. I've taken it off you. You left the sink dirty. You left the peanut butter smudge on the counter. I said, I feel overwhelmed and unappreciated, right? And they don't want to make me feel overwhelmed or unappreciated. So they say, oh gosh, Mom, I'm so sorry. So I don't know. Have you heard of those styles of communication?
Yeah, I have actually. And I was just thinking about how the two function. Sometimes you can use both in one scenario, but a good example is maybe as a boss, using I feel a lot is not going to cut it. But I call, I'm sorry, what the other one was?
Communication sandwich.
The sandwich, the Oreo, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And the Oreo sandwich, I guess that's a sandwich. Mm-hmm. Or is it a cookie? You decide. All right, sorry. We'll put up a poll for that. But that one I used a lot with my students when I was teaching. And a lot of it has to do with, okay, you don't want to shut them down. If you just go over all the bad stuff, even if you're short on time, no, you've got to put in the stuff that they did right and that they did well so that it builds their confidence. And we're going to have a little conversation about, okay, well, you didn't really, we could count 5 of those landings because you bounced so much. Mm-hmm. But that's okay. This is what happened. This is how we can fix it. But did you notice that when you did this, and then finish it off with something good?
Positive, yeah.
And that technique works. It also works with children as well. Yeah. And you have to know your kids. A lot of times I've got girls as well. Mm-hmm. And so I feel is a much better way to go when you're talking about what they did right, what they did wrong, to cover those things. I feel like you didn't listen to me and that you didn't respect me in that moment. And that works a lot better than saying, well, you did this right. But you disrespected me here. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, they need to understand my feelings and then I can understand their feelings. And that works a lot better with them.
Yeah.
But going to a student, I feel like that landing wasn't good. It just doesn't work. So you do have to take both of those and figure out what position am I in? Am I a position of authority? Am I a position of a mentor teaching? And figure out where that works best.
Which communication style is going to fit that situation?
Exactly.
Well, and this is the awkward part of the I feel statements is it's not just like a quick formula. It is, I have to sit down with my clients and help them generate these I feel statements to be effective. And so you can probably YouTube examples of I feel statements and practice them and practice them and practice them. And I role play with my clients. If I'm seeing one of the spouses, okay, you feel this way, let's practice the I feel statement so that they do it correctly and productively. And then going over other ideas of, do you think an I feel statement is appropriate in the situation? And if not, let's go over some other options.
I want to touch on that really quick because that's going to feel really awkward. I can't speak for the women who are listening, but I know for men, like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to role play. It seems really ridiculous. It seems like it's not going to be any value. I'll just do it in the moment and be good at it. And I can tell you that's not going to work.
No.
Okay. So if you think that you can do that, I guarantee it's not going to work.
Yep.
I'll bet dollars to donuts that you're going to fail. You're going to burn that sucker in. Trust me. And so here's a great example from the military. So in the Marine Corps, everybody is a basic rifleman. And we, for the majority part, now there are some exceptions, but for the majority part, we outshoot every other branch of the service. And I know some of you Army guys are like, oh, I could outshoot a Marine. Yeah, good luck, buddy. You can't do it. It's not going to happen. There's very few of you out there that can outshoot the Marines.
Yeah.
Because we spend so much time practicing it. As where the other services, they do it in boot camp or in training, or if you're in combat arms and infantry, you may do it a little bit more. But every single Marine, we practice on the range nonstop. Yeah. It's part of our qualifications as a Marine. So if you can't qualify, you get kicked out. Like if you can't shoot and hit your target, you get kicked out, and that's it.
Yeah,
it's over for you. Now, why are we so good? Well, one, it's the tradition of the Marine Corps, right? But number two, when you go out onto the range, you don't just go out there and start firing. For an entire week before you even get to the range where they give you live ammunition, and it doesn't matter how long you've been in the Marine Corps, okay, how many times you've been to the range, that first week is called snap-in week. So snap-in week is you're just aiming in on these white barrels with these little tiny black targets on them that are like 50 yards away, and you're just laying in the prone, you're practicing your body movements, you're practicing your breathing, your trigger control, and there's a coach there watching you practice this, and you're just pulling the trigger on a dry chamber. There's no rounds in it. You're just practicing all of those fundamentals, all of the motions, the fundamentals, the breathing, the relaxing, the like how if you don't muscle the weapon. So if you're laying prone and your point of impact is lower than the target, you don't raise the weapon up with your hand. You actually change your body position. You'll sink your hips a little bit lower into the ground, which will raise that up. So your body position changes, not muscling the weapon. That's how you get accurate. So then when we go to the range, we're a lot more effective at hitting our targets. We get higher scores. That's why we're able to outshoot the majority of the other armed services out there, because we spend so much time doing things like that, the practicing before we get to the live fire. Yeah. And so that's where this comes into play here too. If you want to be really good at these communication things that you're talking about, you have to practice them. You have to do the role playing. You have to put the time and energy into doing that before.
That's really good, Aaron.
Yeah, before you have to get into that environment where you have to do it for real.
Yeah.
So the practice is super, super important. And I know I'm going to get some hate mail from you Army guys out there. Anytime you want to meet me at the range, bro, like send it.
Bro.
Oh, you want to outshoot me?
What's crazy when you said all of those things, right, is when I was a lioness, chosen to be a lioness, they took me and 3 other females out for 3 weeks into the desert, and they trained us on advanced hand-to-hand combat and advanced weapon skills. And those are the kinds of things that they trained us on that I didn't get just in basic training.
Right.
Right. And it's because I was preparing to have to go and actually do it in real life.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, because in the other armed services, I mean, you may qualify with the weapon, but then if your job doesn't require you to be combat arms, then you're really not going to use that weapon again ever in your career. Like especially like in the Air Force, they rarely use their weapons at all, other than for parades, unless you're security forces or something. But in the Marine Corps, like you're using that thing all the time. Doesn't matter what job you are. Everyone is a basic rifleman. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
There's something I wanted to add to both of those techniques is, and I was just thinking about communication in general. And a lot of times when you speak, even if you're speaking the I feel, the person on the other end can still misinterpret that.
Yeah.
And so another thing, you hear a lot of us go back to things we've done a long time ago. It's just because it's ingrained. And one of the things that we used to do when we fly is when you're teaching someone is a positive exchange of flight controls. This is a basic thing you learn like day one. And it's because it's so important. Yeah. If I think you have the flight controls and you think I have the flight controls, nobody's flying the plane.
Yeah.
It's a bad thing. And I don't care if you are in a little puddle jumper or you're in a 787. You use positive exchange of flight controls. Watch the movie Sully. You'll see the handoff. And the one that we do, especially in training, is if I teach something like, all right, you have the flight controls. The person needs to respond to me. I have the flight controls. And typically I would look over, verify, and say, all right, you have the flight controls. There is no dispute of what just occurred.
Yes.
when you get into those I feel statements, or you get into that cookie or sandwich, it's when you're done, now, do you see what I was saying? Do you understand my feelings? Do you have something you need to ask? Make sure at the end of that whole experience, the other person fully understands what just happened, what just transpired. Yeah. Because if the other person hears, I feel like you disrespected me, and then they lock in on that, even though you're sharing your feeling, trying to explain why, they might have just shut off at that. Well, yeah, you're mad at me. Whoa, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, do you understand why I feel that way and why I don't want to feel that way? And do you want me to feel it? So you can go a little bit deeper. But if you don't do that follow-up, all that work could end up being for nothing.
I mean, have you sat in on my counseling sessions? No, it's
you have to reflect it back. Right?
Yeah, it's the we're all wired to listen, to respond, instead of listen to hear. And so what's one common practice I do in counseling sessions?
I say listen to understand instead of listen to
hear. Hear, understand, yeah. It depends on, like, I'm listening to what you're saying so I can hear and understand what you're saying. I'm not listening to you so I can respond to what you're saying, right? And that's why we do the practice of, so what I hear you saying is this, right? And then if I get it wrong, you get the opportunity to say, no, that's not what I said.
Right.
And just going into learning to intentionally listen, to understand.
It's a skill.
And that needs practice.
Yes. So it's really cool. I'm a big statistics guy. I love numbers. I'm not great at adding them together, but I still love numbers. And so I did some research because I'm going to be speaking at the Choctaw Nation. So I'm going to be doing their intro. I get like 90 minutes. And then they want me to do like another like small workshop about communication in marriage, which I'm the perfect guy for that. But no, so I looked up, I actually have something really cool that we're going to do, and we'll actually do it probably at one point here.
Okay.
It's that reading. Remember the reading, the husband and wife reading?
Yes.
And so we have a whole lesson plan that we built out according to that. But what I learned, I looked up some statistics about communication. So what percentage of communication do you think are the words that we're speaking? Any guess?
90.
7%.
I was going to say 9%.
7% of communication are the words that I just spoke. That's 7%. Okay. So 47% is voice is tone of voice and voice inflection.
Okay.
So not the words that you said, but how you said it.
Yeah.
Where you paused, where you emphasized, where your tone of voice went up or down. That inflection tells people a lot about how
babe, you don't look fat in that dress.
Right? Yes. Too many comments. We're just moving right along. All right. And 52% is what they call nonverbal communication, which is your posture, right? This tells people that they're open to communication. This tells people you're closed off, right? How you're standing, hands on your hips, leaning, if you're making eye contact, if you're on your phone, if you're doing something else while you're talking, all of that communication. So only 7% of only 7% of the words that you're speaking are communication.
Yeah.
The rest of it is how we're interacting in that environment, how our posture is, the tone of voice that we're using. And so I have this conversation with my wife a lot. It's not what she says, it's how she says it that can come across offensive, you know? And so recognizing that only 7% of our communication are the words.
Yeah.
You know, focus more on tone of voice, voice inflection, body posture. All of those things are more important than the actual words.
That's really good, yeah.
So that's my one fun fact for the day. There you go.
3 fun facts.
So man, there's so much more I want to unpack about communication. We could literally do probably 90 minutes just on this.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll become a regular segment. I don't know, but there's so many other pieces of that. So we're going to put a pin in this. and come back to it. Thank you, Casey, so much for joining us, being our first guest on the podcast.
It was fun.
So real quick question, what's it like being on this side of the camera versus the other?
I don't like it.
He loves it.
No. I'm typically, I do a lot of video editing and a lot of stuff for our church. And the hardest part is when I do everybody else's stuff, super easy. When I have to actually do the recording, it takes 10 takes. I am not good in front of the camera, but you guys made it a lot easier.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thanks, Casey, for joining us.
Yeah,
I'll get back behind the camera.
You got it.
All right, for our next segment, we're actually going to talk about social media and how this can negatively affect our mental health and how people are now on social media just throwing out these terms and not knowing anything about them, just calling somebody a narcissist or calling them these different medical terms, but having no idea what that even means and how that is affecting not just our own mental health, but society as a whole and what they understand about mental health conditions. It's actually really damaging people who are struggling with actual mental health conditions when they get lumped into all of these other terms that people are just randomly throwing out, like throwing hand grenades into conversations. So talk to us a little bit about that, Jess.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit about when PTSD really started surfacing, right? I think I was diagnosed with PTSD in 2007, and I had been living with it for, a little while. But then I started hearing it a lot, and people would say, I have PTSD from this, PTSD from that. And the difference was PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. Mm-hmm. So everybody has post-traumatic stress anytime they go through any kind of traumatic situation, a car accident, or you name it. Everybody has a certain amount of stress after a trauma. That's post-traumatic stress. And when it lumps into the disorder is in this book right here, this big, huge diagnostic and statistic manual, right? And it's like pages and pages of how to diagnose with PTSD. Same with narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, all of those,
sociopath, psychopath.
Yeah.
Like all these terms that people just throw out there randomly.
Yeah. And it really diminishes that person's value if it's not really a diagnosis, right? And so I also think back to Johnny Depp and that
Amber Heard.
Yeah. And everybody's throwing out all these diagnoses of her, right? And we all know it was a pretty crazy situation, but for a regular lay person to diagnose in their own mind, publicly on Facebook, something that they didn't, I went to school for 3 years to be a mental health counselor, to study that book. And I'm still very cautious about putting diagnoses on people. So if you're just a random person and, everybody thinks their ex-husband or ex-wife was a narcissist. Everybody.
Right.
Like not everybody is a narcissist. Everybody has narcissistic tendencies. Absolutely. It means self. I'm thinking of myself. Right. But a genuine disorder is where people cannot function outside of that disorder, to put it in a nutshell. And so it's damaging to people's character when we throw those kinds of diagnoses out on other people when we don't really know what it all entails.
Right. So this is really a teaching moment for all of us, all of our viewers here, we want to really avoid doing that. If we've done that in the past or catch ourselves doing that, or friends or family throwing that stuff out there, don't blow them up on social media. Obviously, that's just going to make it worse. But maybe, have a private conversation with them. Send them a private message, or even better, talk to them face to face about it, like how we're having this conversation with you guys right now about not using those terms because they diminish the value of the individual, but then they also misconstrue what that condition actually looks like and what it actually is. And so as a society, we can get this wrong perception of what that actually looks like, which hurts all of us as a whole. And it makes the job of the mental health counselor even more difficult, right? Because now they have to undo all of those ideas that society has put on this diagnosis, which can be even more difficult. And so we would just ask that you would think about that before throwing those terms out. And one of the things that I thought was really, really, really cool, and it's So stick with me on this because it's parallel to this and I'll bring it back around. There was a term, and when we were kids, we used to use this term all the time. And I'm going to use it once just for this, and then I'll refer to it later as something else. But we used to call each other retards all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's a term, like when I grew up, anytime you did something stupid, that's the term that we would use. And so growing up, I never really thought anything about it. Even though I know there are people with a real condition, mental retardation, where it has, they have a learning condition that makes them to where their brain doesn't operate the same as us. They can't comprehend, right? It's a real condition of people that are in our society who are great people. And we would use that as a term to make fun of each other or things like that. As I've grown and I've become more wise, I don't use that term anymore. But really the turning point for me to not use that term, because I thought, it's no big deal, was I watched Johnny Knoxville. So if you guys remember the show Jackass, Johnny Knoxville, he did a movie, and I'm blanking on the actor's name right now, but he has some mental handicaps. And he did a movie with him. And after that, he did this whole campaign against using that term. And he calls it the R word. He just didn't do it anymore because now he's met somebody who has that mental condition who takes great offense to people using that as a term to make fun of each other, because you're saying that word to make that person less than, which is equal to what this person who's dealing with it, who's a very successful actor. Yeah. He's done Peanut Butter Falcon. So if you've seen the movie Peanut Butter Falcon, that's one of the movies that he's in. Fantastic actor, great guy. But that really changed because Johnny Knoxville, I loved his show Jackass. He was great. And he's really that fun-loving guy, right? And you don't expect him to come out and do this big PSA about that. And he talked about his own personal journey, meeting this guy who was a fellow actor and being like, you know what, that word's not cool anymore. I'm not going to use it. And so we all have that same power as well in our sphere of influence.
Yeah, that's good.
Right? Like putting it on social media and saying, hey, don't use this anymore. You're going to get zero traction on it. I'm just telling you. You don't have the social media clout to get people to change. Yeah. But you have the personal clout. You have those personal relationships with people in your sphere of influence that you can say, hey, we don't use terms like that. That's not the kind of culture that we want to have. We want to have positive mental health conversations and not use terms like that in an inappropriate or irresponsible way.
Yeah.
And so just as Johnny Knoxville really changed my perception of that, we can do that with each other when it comes to throwing out these mental health diagnoses when we really don't know what we're talking about. So that's what I wanted to touch on about that. And if you haven't seen Peanut Butter Falcon, I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic movie. It's got Shia LaBeouf in it. LaBeouf, I don't know how to say his name. Shiloh, you know who he is. That guy. And great movie. You're absolutely going to love it. And you'll be exposed to the actor that I was just talking about.
Yeah, I'll go watch it.
So what else about social media, Jess, should we be aware of when it comes to some of the dangers out there? What are some guardrails that we can put in place? That's better. What are some guardrails we can put in place for social media?
Well, the first one that would come to mind is don't use it as your own personal psychologist.
Oh, there you go.
But I guess that's even hard to say because if you don't have a counselor or anybody to talk to, and that's where you draw your support from, I just would be careful.
I have an idea. I have an alternate method that I've been using. So I use social media to connect with people and things like that. But those more private, intimate things, you see people oversharing on social media all the time. It's kind of cringy, right? You're like, or vague posting. You see that happen a lot.
Yeah.
So I would say avoid that at all costs. That's not gonna improve your mental health. It's not gonna improve the situation. It's just gonna cause more conflict, more anxiety. So don't do that at all. What's better is to find a small group of people that you know and trust. A squad.
Your squad.
Right? And we'll talk about this a lot. A squad. 2 or 3 people that you know and trust that you can just chat with in a private chat. And that's where you can unload those things. That's where you can talk about those things in a safer environment. And the other thing that's really cool is the best way to build mental resiliency is to give social support. So now if you ask your friends for help, you're struggling with an issue and you ask for help and they respond to you and give you some help, it builds their mental resiliency, right? And so we'll talk about that brain-body connection in another episode, but that's the basis of it. when you're helping people solve their problems, giving social support, you're building your own mental resiliency. So if you're the guy out there that's always like, oh, I like to help everybody, but I don't have any problems, you're actually doing your friends a great disservice. Because if you ask them for help and assistance, you're helping them build their mental resilience.
Sure.
So even if you have a friend that's a hot mess, right? And we all have a friend like that. And if you don't, then you're the hot mess, okay? But if you have a friend, and we're all a hot mess from time to time, right? Sure. So if you have a friend that's a hot mess, and so you never share with them your struggles, what you're dealing with, you never give them the opportunity, you're depriving them of the opportunity to build their own mental resiliency and get stronger. Okay, so don't be afraid to do that, to ask for help, to let them assist you and give you assistance, or just give you social support, because it's going to help them, get their daily dose, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Yeah. And you're going to help them build that mental resiliency by being authentic and real and sharing your experiences.
And this isn't a free ticket to create a squad for like your gossip central.
No,
right?
No,
it's just mental health support. Not like, hey, here's my little triangle of people that I can go talk smack about all these vague posts and stuff like that. But side note.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's not a dumping ground where you can just like rant about people. It's like, hey, I'm really struggling with this interpersonal relationship that I'm having, or I'm having this problem in my marriage, or I'm really trying to stop drinking. I need some accountability. Things like that. That's what that is for. Yeah, you're right. Not to gossip and talk trash about people. That's not what that's for at all. So good point on that.
Well, you ready for our micro session?
No. I don't think I'll ever actually be ready for it.
Yeah.
But let's get into it.
Okay.
So before we do this micro session, I just want to talk a little bit about it. So go ahead and get your drink if you want, Jess. That's fine. I'm just gonna monologue here with the camera. No. So here's the trouble with doing this micro session. There's several problems, but I'm just gonna hit like the top 4. Number one, is it's hard to do this like live on the spot, because I don't necessarily know what's coming, right? I know kind of what we're talking about, but in the pre-show, we don't really discuss this at all. This part is we want it to be as authentic and candid as possible. So we don't script this at all. We don't talk about it. It doesn't even say, it just says tip of the day. It doesn't say anything about what we're talking about on our notes, on our show notes. The other thing is that it's really hard to be authentic in the moment, but still be able to move in the direction that we want to hit for the show.
Yeah.
And so as we go through this, 90% of what you hear me say is real, authentic, like me being authentic and real about whatever we're talking about. And then probably 5% of it is me trying to steer it in a direction to make sure that we hit the point that we want to talk about. So I just wanted to let you guys know, like, what you're seeing here is 90% of it is real, authentic me, and only 5% is really me trying to steer it in the direction we're trying to go to show the point. And I can assume the same for you, Jess, right? And part of the third part that's really difficult is the time restraints that we have.
Yeah.
Right. So we're only doing a few minutes of this. So like in the last episode, you saw Jess have to kind of speed it up a little bit. Yeah. Like normally I wouldn't give you this answer. I would lead you down this path, but that takes a lot of minutes that we don't have. Right. Yeah. And so that's the other, we don't want you guys to have this preconception of, I can go in and talk for 10 minutes and then I'm good to go. Right. So these sessions are usually 40 minutes long. And you usually have, multiple sessions, over a month or 6 weeks or whatever your therapist says. So don't think that you can just go in and for 10 minutes and then have it solved. It takes a lot longer than that, but we want to expose you guys to this. And so those are the things that I wanted to just kind of put out there for you guys as we get into this session, to just kind of level set for you and understand that. And maybe we put that as a disclaimer, Casey. We put that down there on each one of these sessions that just a little disclaimer, because I want to show people what it looks like, but I don't want to give them the wrong idea either. Yeah. That it can just be solved like that. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So we will do that. We'll start putting a disclaimer on there for you guys. So we apologize if we gave you the wrong idea. We want to make that correction now, and going forward in the future, we'll definitely have that disclaimer on there. So
perfect.
All right. So I will do my best at being real and authentic. And Jess will do her best at trying to get to those points without making me cry. Hey, I didn't cry last time.
You haven't cried at all since our first one.
No, I think I cried in a couple of the first ones, right? First and second.
No.
No?
Just the first one.
All right.
Okay.
All right. So what are we doing today? You want to introduce it and then go into it?
Let's talk today about. Can you think in the last week or two a situation you were in with somebody that you cared for and a communication went wrong or sideways?
Yeah, when it happened today.
Okay. Unpack that for me. Tell me what happened.
So we were driving to work, and my wife asked me if I would go to the coffee stand. She wanted to get an energy drink with some green apple in it, right? And so she likes a very specific type of energy drink. It's sugar-free Lotus with some green apple, and that's what she likes to drink. Mm-hmm. And I've never seen this thing in the store. I've never seen it anywhere other than at this little coffee stand. And there's a couple coffee stands that carry it, but it's not very common. And so as we were driving there, I asked her the question. I said, is this Lotus? Is this something that we can like buy in a store and we can have at home? And instantly she got upset. She thought that I thought it was too expensive. I didn't want to drive out there to get it. All of these things. So she got angry at me because she thought that I didn't want to get this energy drink. Mm-hmm. But really, I just wanted to find out if there was an easier way that I could get it and have it at home so it was more convenient for her. Mm-hmm. So my intention was good. My delivery was poor. Mm-hmm. And then she had a poor response to it. And normally that would just spiral out of control.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How would that spiral out?
Well, because then I would be offended and I would say something snarky, mm-hmm. and it would just deteriorate the conversation. She'd get more angry and snarky, and she'd go, "Fine, I don't need one." I'm like, "Great, well then you're not going to get one," and I would just drive on, yeah. Right? And that's how it would work.
Yeah, and that goes back to what we talked about earlier: the defend, deflect, deny. Mm-hmm. So when we get into those cycles of falling apart, we go back and forth to defending, deflecting, denying, and how do you think this is what makes it hard in a counseling session, right? Because she's not here. Right. And I can ask her like let's break down what happened up until this point to see if she was overwhelmed or feeling a certain way to interpret what you said the way she did, right? But for you, from your perspective, what could have been a better way of asking her that question?
You know, that's honestly what I was going through in my head. Like, I feel like I took a wrong turn here. That's exactly. I'm driving. I'm like, did I take a wrong turn? Like, what happened? Right? Because my intention was to help solve a problem. Because, like I said, it's hard to find this specific drink that she wants. We've got to, go out of our way to find it all the time, which is fine. But how can I make this easier and more convenient for her? I was trying to solve a problem that she didn't see as a problem. Right? And I think that, I felt like I took a wrong turn in the conversation. And so I just had to pause for a few minutes and try and figure that out. Like, what did I do wrong? And I feel like I'm like that a lot in my life, where I say something and the conversation goes awry and I'm like, what happened?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to go back and figure it out. And I have the hardest time trying to figure that out. That's where I'm really stuck, is how do I better communicate my intention to the words that I'm saying? And that's where I'm really struggling. So I'm not sure, I can't really speak to like how she was feeling. I know she was on her phone working, responding to some emails and doing some things like that. But I'm more focused on like, what can I do better to avoid that situation? Or if I find myself in that situation, to get out of it gracefully.
Sure. So getting out of it gracefully, a lot of the times means we take the hit. And so it could look like, I recognize you're defensive about my comment, and I want to make sure you understand what I'm saying. What did you hear me say?
Oh, I'm taking notes, literally.
And then have her repeat what she heard you say. And that's when things are they're going to come out and say, well, I heard you say, can we buy this somewhere else so I don't have to keep driving to this one coffee stand to find it? Thank you for sharing that with me. If that's how it came across, I apologize. What I meant to say and intended to communicate is that I want to make this easier for you if you want it to be easier, because I don't mind driving for you to get this. I just wanted to provide an option, a second option to make getting this specific drink for you a little easier if you wanted that. How do you think she would have responded to that?
Yeah, I think it would have been a lot better than what I did. For sure. I think that would, it feels like it takes the air out of the argument.
Mm-hmm.
You know, anytime that I apologize, genuinely apologize.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like it takes it turns the heat on the stove down. You know?
Well, and we don't have to apologize for something we didn't do, right? You didn't say, hey, this is irritating for me to have to drive out of my way to get you this drink. You didn't say that. So you're not apologizing for that.
No, I say, I'm sorry that you felt that way.
Yeah.
Right? I'm sorry I made you feel that way. Or I'm sorry that it came across that way.
I'm sorry that what I said came across in a way that made you feel like this was irritating to me to have to drive, because it's not. I'm happy to do it for you.
Right.
So then you can genuinely apologize and not feel like you're just apologizing so we can move on.
Right. Which that doesn't work either.
Right. So it's validating her feelings.
Oh, validate her feelings.
Yeah.
Okay.
Validating her feelings and how she heard it, and just making sure you guys are on the same page. So we don't go into that cycle of miscommunication and then deflect, deny. And also, Pastor Matt taught me a really good part of communication is time, tone, place. Mm-hmm. So make sure it's the right place, make sure it's the right time, and make sure you're doing it with the right tone. And we talked about 7% words.
Yes.
Right? All that stuff it's just communication 101.
Huh. Okay. Maybe that's part of my problem is that my tone might be off. Pay closer attention to that.
Good. All right. Well, I'll be keeping tabs on you. I'll ask Holly how you're doing with your tone. And I will report back to you guys how he's doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was awesome, Jess.
Good.
Thank you.
Cool.
That was really good. And literally like that, I'm not kidding. Like I'm taking notes, guys, because this is something that is a problem that I'm trying to work on. And my wife and I, we do talk about this. Yeah. You know, we've gotten to a point now where it doesn't spiral out of control like it used to. It used to be bad. It used to be arguments that lasted for days over something like this.
Yeah.
Right? But we've learned to like, okay, take it down a notch. Like, okay, wait a minute. That's not what I meant. I was just trying to find an easier solution. You know, in just explaining where I was coming from, but I'm trying to avoid even getting in that situation. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So this is great. I'm going to pay attention to my tone. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm the one who even talked about that, right?
Time, place, tone, right? So maybe not while you're on your way to get her this drink do you bring it up, because it might come as an attack.
Ah, yes. So we're still in the session. Okay, got
it. It's a wrap. It's a wrap.
All right, you guys. Well, that's it for us and the Mental Health Janitors. We hope that this week we were able to educate you on these really cool mental health tips and tricks and technology that's out there. Empower you to go out there and try these wearables, try these techniques that we just showed you today about the conversation sandwich and the
Oreo.
I feel statements.
I like the Oreo better. From
the Oreo sandwich. I don't know if it's a sandwich or a cookie because I hate Oreos. I'm going to get some hate mail for that too, but it's okay. We can't always be right. You guys are all wrong. So empower you to take control of your mental health journey by not eating Oreos, but using wearables. Using wearables and trying these techniques out. We want to encourage you to allow your friends and family to increase their mental.
Here it is again.
We'd like to encourage you to allow your friends to build their mental resiliency by giving them a safe place where they can share their struggles, and you can also share yours with them, helping them build their mental resiliency. Yeah. And encourage you guys to seek out therapy. It's not that bad. Try it out. Do some sessions. I'm doing mine live on camera, okay? It's not that bad. It is bad in the beginning because it's scary. It's unknown. You don't know what's going to happen, right? But once you get past that and you start actually seeing some breakthrough, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, why did I wait so long to do this?
Exactly.
I know that's how I felt. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so helpful. Why did I wait so long? And so that's what we want to encourage you to go out there, use these tools, seek some professional counseling so you can increase your mental wellness.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you guys, that's it for me. I'm Sergeant Q. And again, this is Doc Jess.
Doc Jess.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Not doctor.
I said Doc.
I know.
Oh, okay.
Disclaimer.
Perfect. I love those endings.